Labyrinth by Sebastian Keating. Chapter 1. The Sunset of Security. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long, dramatic shadows over the sprawl of Canberra. It painted the city in hues of orange and crimson, a masterpiece only nature could orchestrate, making even the rigid lines of Parliament House appear momentarily poetic. The glass dome shimmered in the dying light, reflecting the burning sky as if it foresaw the chaos to come. Inside those walls, within the meticulously guarded corridors of Australia's political heart, Prime Minister David Langford adjusted his tie and leaned forward, eyebrows furrowed as he listened intently to the briefing. A routine national security meeting, or so it was meant to be. The kind of session where seasoned officials recycled risk assessments while Langford mentally plotted the rest of his day. Until the room vibrated. At first, it was subtle, a tremor, like a truck rumbling past outside. Langford, poised and disciplined, didn't flinch. But then came another, more intense, followed by the faintest sound of glass rattling. The ornate water pitcher in front of him trembled, spilling a drop across the mahogany surface of the conference table.
"What's happening?"
Langford demanded, his voice low but brimming with urgency. Around him, eyes darted. The aides and ministers in the room exchanged nervous glances, but none offered answers. It was then that the chamber doors, imposing slabs of oak, usually opened only during ceremonies, burst open with a force that made several people rise from their chairs in alarm. Leading the intrusion was Emily Hardwick, senior agent with ASIO. Her reputation preceded her, a formidable mix of precision, intuition, and unflinching resolve. She strode in without hesitation, flanked by 4 agents in tactical gear.
"Prime Minister, we need to leave. Now."
Her words were clipped, absolute.
"This isn't a drill."
Langford stood instantly, adrenaline surging into every cell of his body.
"Why? What's going on?"
"No time."
Hardwick's eyes met his, offering just enough reassurance to move. Papers forgotten, the Prime Minister followed her lead. The group evacuated the chamber, a flurry of motion in tailored suits and bulletproof vests. Echoes of chaos bounced off the marble halls as sirens began to wail, a sound foreign to these dignified corridors. Langford's thoughts spiraled as they descended. His years of service had taught him protocol, had drilled scenarios into his mind. But none had ever reached this point. None had ever felt this real. Beneath his statesman's calm, his stomach clenched. Something had breached the security of Parliament House. Hardwick guided them with military precision through secure access points.
"Extremist faction breached the outer perimeter,"
she explained, eyes scanning every angle.
"They're calling themselves the Guardians of Peace. They're armed, organized, and they've issued demands."
"What demands?"
Langford's breath caught.
"They want Australia to sever all diplomatic ties with Israel and release classified intelligence files they claim implicate Netanyahu in genocide."
"That's insane."
Langford blinked.
"Maybe,"
Hardwick replied,
"but they're willing to die for it. And worse, they're willing to kill."
As the elevator plunged downward toward the fortified sublevels, Langford felt something he hadn't in years, real, primal fear. This was no longer a hypothetical. This was war, declared on the seat of his nation's power, and he was caught in the middle. Chapter 2. The Unseen Path. The group halted before an unassuming door labeled Maintenance. To the untrained eye, it appeared mundane, just another access point in a labyrinth of back corridors. But Emily Hardwick knew better. She slid a keycard across a nearly invisible scanner embedded in the wall. A soft green light pulsed to life, and with a muted click, the door opened inward, revealing a narrow staircase that spiraled into shadow.
"These tunnels were built during the Cold War,"
Hardwick explained as they descended. Her voice, while calm, had a taut edge.
"designed to withstand a nuclear assault. Most people in government don't even know this level exists."
Langford glanced over his shoulder as the heavy door shut behind them, sealing them into darkness with a metallic thud that reverberated in his chest. He muttered under his breath. The descent was steep, the steps cast in dim red from emergency lighting strips barely clinging to life. Dust swirled in the air with each footstep. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the scuffing of shoes on concrete and the occasional bark of an agent's radio signal, static-filled and unintelligible. Once on level 1, Hardwick signaled them to stop. She pulled out a ruggedized device, sleek, military-grade, covered in matte black rubber. It was designed to link to secure satellites, to to establish lines immune to civilian interference. She powered it on. The screen flickered. Then nothing. No signal, no uplink, just a blinking red error message.
We're being jammed.
She said, her voice low and even, though her eyes betrayed concern.
Jammed? That's not just random interference.
Langford's stomach sank.
No, this is deliberate, coordinated.
Around them, aides exchanged worried glances. One of them, a young woman named Talia D'Souza, recently promoted to foreign policy advisor, tightened her grip on the leather-bound folder she'd carried throughout the evacuation. It now seemed as useless as it was heavy.
This is a direct assault on our infrastructure.
Langford said aloud, his voice echoing faintly in the concrete chamber.
They're here to dismantle trust in our intelligence, our safety, our alliances. That folder you're holding?
She nodded toward D'Souza.
It may already be compromised.
The tunnel ahead branched into 3 directions, each marked only with faded Cyrillic letters, remnants from an era when maps were burned rather than digitized. Hardwick scanned each passage, then chose the leftmost.
This way leads to an older surveillance annex. It's abandoned now, but we might find analog equipment that's harder to jam.
They pressed on. Langford's footsteps echoed louder than the others, as though the walls were measuring his resolve. He tried to focus, to recall briefing diagrams, contingency plans, anything to help them navigate. But all he had was the unknown. They passed rusted signs, obsolete warning labels, and archaic wall fixtures. Each step further confirmed a terrifying truth. These tunnels were no longer just a relic of the past. They were a battlefield. A sudden metallic clang behind them made everyone freeze.
Hold.
Hardwick raised a hand. Silent. Then, from the distance, a whisper of movement. Footsteps, not their own. Slow, deliberate. Langford's heart thudded in his chest. They're down here already.
Hardwick nodded, drawing her sidearm with practiced ease. We're not alone.
And just like that, the darkness seemed to grow thicker. Every shadow looked like a threat. Every echo a hunter. But they pressed on, because retreat was not an option. And because in the depths of the earth, only forward offered even the illusion of escape. Chapter 3. Descending into darkness. The emergency lights pulsed in a dying rhythm, dim, flickering reds casting long shadows that danced across the narrow concrete corridors like ghosts from another age. Langford's polished dress shoes clicked against the cold floor, an oddly jarring sound in the silence, punctuated only by the hum of old ventilation systems coughing dusty air into the tunnels. The deeper they moved, the more surreal everything felt. The world above, sunsets, sirens, political negotiations, felt like a dream Langford had woken from. Down here in this bunker of buried secrets, the rules were different. Power wasn't measured in votes or diplomacy. It was measured in silence, in survival. Agent Hardwick moved at the front of their group, weapon drawn but kept low. Behind her followed a cluster of aides and operatives, including Langford, who stayed central, shielded yet active. His eyes scanned the tunnels constantly, not just for threats, but for understanding. The walls bore symbols, faded white stencils, arrows, and markings that once meant something to Cold War-era intelligence staff. Some bore numbers, others the cryptic insignia of now-defunct agencies.
Hardwick paused at one junction, running her fingers over an old rusted plaque written in Russian. These were meant to guide agents in the event of an invasion, she murmured. If you knew the code, you could find safe rooms, weapons, radios.
Langford nodded slowly.
Do you know the code? Hardwick smirked faintly. I know enough to fake it.
The group veered left, following a series of arrows that curved downward. The deeper they went, the more claustrophobic it became. The concrete seemed to close in, as though the very walls were listening, remembering. Langford's mind began to churn with questions, suspicions. Could this faction truly have infiltrated so deeply without help? Did someone on the inside facilitate this breach?
Emily, he said quietly, using her first name for the first time since they entered the tunnels. How much do we know about the Guardians of Peace? Any intel from before today?
Hardwick glanced at him sidelong. Not enough. Fringe group, online presence was negligible until last week. Then boom, recruitment spikes, encrypted traffic, now this.
Langford's brows furrowed. Sounds like they had help. Her silence spoke volumes. As they rounded a tight corner, the sound came again, faint but unmistakable. Footsteps. Langford froze. Hardwick lifted a fist. Everyone behind her halted mid-step. She turned her head, eyes scanning the darkness. The footsteps were measured, confident, but distant, just close enough to know they were being followed. She motioned for silence. They waited, seconds stretched like wire. Langford could hear his own heartbeat. Then silence again. Hardwick gestured quickly, guiding them into a side corridor, narrower and rougher, less official. The air grew colder. The walls, once smooth, now bore gouges, cracks, decay.
This isn't on any map, one aide whispered.
Exactly why it's useful, Hardwick replied.
Langford followed, his mind racing. Every choice they made now could mean the difference between ambush and escape. They passed an old wooden door, rotted and split, behind which lay darkness like a mouth waiting to swallow them. Langford couldn't help but glance in and saw something etched on the inside wall. "We're not alone." The letters were carved deep, ragged, as though by a desperate hand years ago, or maybe days ago.
Keep moving, Hardwick ordered, voice low but firm.
The group moved forward again, now more urgently. Tension sat on every shoulder like a second coat. And yet, through the fear, Langford felt something else stir inside him. Clarity. This wasn't just about running anymore. It was about understanding, uncovering, fighting back. But first, they had to survive the dark. Chapter 4. A Strategist's Mind. They moved deeper, the corridor splitting into a fork. Hardwick stopped at the junction, checking a battered schematic she'd pulled from a hidden alcove moments earlier.
This one leads toward the decommissioned surveillance annex, she said, motioning right. We might find analog lines there, hardwired and hard to jam.
Prime Minister Langford nodded, but something in his gut twisted. It wasn't the darkness this time, nor the constant threat of gunfire echoing in the distance. It was the people, specifically, someone among them. As they turned into the next passage, he drifted closer to Talia de Souza. The young aide had kept unnervingly quiet since the initial escape. He had known her as brilliant, driven, perhaps even overly ambitious. But this silence, the way her eyes never fully met his since entering the tunnels, it was off.
Talia, he murmured, matching her pace. What's in that folder you've been clutching since the evacuation?
She glanced down. Foreign relations documents. Briefings on recent Israeli-Australian intelligence agreements, classified?
Yes, but nothing that should, she hesitated. Nothing that should be relevant, this.
Langford stared at her for a moment longer, then nodded.
You've done well. Stay close.
But something wasn't right. As the group paused again, Hardwick up ahead scouting the route, Langford quietly pulled aside Jacob Wren, one of his oldest aides. The man was loyal, sharp, and knew Langford's instincts like a second pulse.
Eyes on de Souza, he whispered, discreetly.
Jacob nodded once, tension flickering in his eyes. They moved on. Then it happened. A sudden burst of static cut through the tunnel, someone's comms crackling to life, despite the supposed jamming. Hardwick spun on her heel, weapon raised.
Who activated a transmitter?
She barked. Everyone froze. No one answered, and then Talia, pale, hands-shaking, spoke.
It wasn't me.
But it was too late. Hardwick was already advancing on her. Langford saw it too, the small device peeking from her coat pocket. Not standard issue, not government grade. It beeped once, a moment of stunned silence.
Talia, who are you transmitting to?
Langford stepped forward, voice steel. Talia's eyes flicked to the floor. Her lips quivered.
I didn't mean to. They threatened my family. They knew everything. If I didn't help them, they said they'd kill them.
Langford's world tilted for a heartbeat. His mind snapped into overdrive.
What have you given them?
Langford's voice was tight, controlled fury.
Locations, schedules, the emergency tunnel schematics. I didn't know it would go this far.
Hardwick disarmed her in a flash, yanking the device free and checking the signal.
It's active,
she growled.
They know exactly where we are.
Suddenly, the faint noise of approaching footsteps wasn't distant anymore. They were near, very near.
You just lit a beacon right into the heart of our last sanctuary.
I'm sorry,
she whispered.
I didn't want anyone to die.
Hardwick stepped forward, gaze cold.
That choice is no longer yours.
Not yet. We use this. Misdirect them.
Langford raised a hand. Hardwick stared at him, then nodded. Talia was taken to the rear, watched closely now. She was a traitor, but also a tool. If they played it right, her signal could lead their enemies into a trap instead of a victory. Langford's strategist's mind returned, sharper than ever. Because betrayal cuts deep, but it can also carve opportunity. Chapter 5, The First Clash. The corridors tightened like a noose. Langford and the remaining team had veered through a rust-stained maintenance shaft, the damp air thick with mildew and tension. Every footstep echoed like a taunt. Behind them, Talia D'Souza walked under strict guard, the weight of her betrayal heavier than the folder she still clutched like penance. Then, a sound. Too crisp, too synchronized. Hardwick halted, hand raised, body coiled.
Positions.
She hissed. The agents fanned out instantly, too late. The corridor ahead erupted with blinding muzzle flashes. Bullets screamed against the walls, chipping stone, shattering light fixtures. An ambush, surgical and swift.
Down.
Hardwick shouted.
Flank them.
She shouted to another agent.
Use the side passage.
Langford crawled to partial cover behind a disused power cabinet. His breath came in short bursts. This wasn't politics. This was war in its rawest form. Talia screamed as bullets tore through the concrete near her feet. An agent yanked her to the floor, shielding her with his body. The enemy was skilled, tactical. These weren't fanatics with rifles. These were professionals. And they'd waited for this moment.
PM, are you hit?
Someone shouted.
No.
Langford checked himself, sharp and focused. He reached for a sidearm reluctantly offered to him during the escape. His hands trembled, less from fear, more from the sheer disbelief that this was his life now. A deafening crack, a grenade bounced toward them, clinking ominously on the floor.
Flashbang.
Hardwick bellowed.
Eyes shut now.
Langford obeyed a split second before the explosion of white light and sound disoriented the hall. His ears rang, his vision blotchy, but he could still hear Hardwick's voice cutting through the confusion.
Push forward, take control.
The ASIO team surged, flanking from both sides. Shouts, screams, gunfire tapering into short, panicked bursts. Moments later, silence returned, but it wasn't calm. It was breathless, the kind of silence that follows narrowly surviving death. Bodies lay sprawled across the floor, both friend and foe. Hardwick approached, blood streaking one sleeve.
We need to move now.
She snapped, relentless and authoritative.
They know our location. Reinforcements won't be far behind.
How many casualties?
Langford asked, strained.
2 agents, 1 aide injured. They hit hard, but we hit back harder.
She replied, gritted. Talia stared at the carnage, tears streaming silently. Guilt etched into every line of her face. Her signal had brought this bloodshed. Her choices had carved this moment. Langford locked eyes with her.
You wanted redemption?
He asked, cold and resolute.
Help us stop them.
The look she gave in return was not of defiance, but of a woman who finally understood the cost of trust and what it meant to earn it back. The Prime Minister turned to the team.
We move, and next time they won't surprise us.
Chapter 6, Revelations in the Depths. They moved swiftly through the aftermath of the ambush, leaving behind the stench of gunpowder and scorched desperation. The deeper tunnels, less traveled and more deteriorated, offered a deceptive silence. But Langford no longer trusted the quiet, not after what they'd just survived. Hardwick led them into a larger chamber, an old war room by the looks of it. Cracked monitor mounts still clung to the concrete walls, and rusted filing cabinets leaned like gravestones along the edges.
We'll hold here for 5,
she said, scanning for threats, methodical. Langford slumped into a metal chair, rubbing the bridge of his nose. His mind was a machine of shifting gears, strategy, suspicion, trauma, and duty grinding against one another. Jacob Wren approached him, holding something wrapped in a blood-stained tactical cloth. Found this on one of the fallen, he said quietly.
Langford opened the cloth.
Inside was a folded page, handwritten in a tight, slanted script. It had been sewn into the lining of a uniform.
Hardwick leaned over his shoulder, reading aloud. Contact secure, asset embedded, keep target alive until confirmation. Do not extract early.
Langford stared at the words.
Asset embedded? They have a spy on the inside?
Jacob's face paled.
They weren't trying to kill you. They were hurting you.
Hardwick's jaw tightened. This was a containment mission.
Langford stood, the weight of it pressing on him.
Someone in our group is reporting back. Someone close.
They scanned the room, their group now reduced to only the core. Every face seemed shadowed now, every silence suspicious. Langford turned slowly.
We need to narrow it down, immediately.
Hardwick nodded. We'll isolate communications, strip devices, cross-reference internal logs.
Langford suddenly looked to Jacob, his most trusted aide, his old friend. But something wasn't right.
Jacob, he said, stepping closer. You said you found the note on one of the attackers.
Yes. Front line, near the end of the hall.
Hardwick's team swept that body before extraction. She cleared it.
Jacob blinked.
Well, maybe she missed.
She doesn't miss. Langford cut him off.
A slow silence. Hardwick was already moving. She pulled Jacob's comlink and tablet from his jacket. She accessed the device with a flick of her wrist. Her expression darkened instantly.
There's a restricted frequency here, she growled. Encrypted comms. External pings routed through a secondary bounce server in Tel Aviv.
Langford stepped back, horror dawning.
You sold me out?
Jacob's lips curled in an odd, mournful smile.
I didn't sell you out, David. I protected what mattered. Australia's entanglements were going to destroy us. I gave us leverage, and you were too slow to see the game.
You endangered everyone, Langford said, fury cracking through his voice.
Hardwick drew her weapon.
No, he's still useful, Langford snapped. But he moves under guard from now on.
Jacob offered no resistance, just silence. As if in his mind, he'd already won something none of them could see. Langford turned away, clenching his fists. The deeper they went, the more layers peeled back, and the rot at the center of power was just beginning to show. Chapter 7, The Turning Tide. The chamber was cold, humming faintly with dormant energy from decades past. The lights overhead flickered, dust swirling like memories long disturbed. Langford stood alone in a far corner, staring into the mottled concrete wall, lost in thought and betrayal. Behind him, Hardwick sifted through the equipment stripped from the fallen attackers. Among the items was a sealed plastic tube, barely noticeable until she cracked open the lining of a ballistic vest. Inside, a tightly rolled piece of parchment.
What is it?
It's a map, she replied, of this tunnel system, but not the ones we know.
Langford frowned. Declassified records never showed this section.
Exactly. This isn't just Cold War architecture. These sections have been added, newer concrete, different layout. Someone's been building in secret.
She tapped a symbol in the lower quadrant, an insignia resembling a spiked circle.
I've seen this before, she said quietly. It's used by off-grid cells operating without state authorization, rogue networks, ghost orgs. This entire section might be a fallback base, or a trap.
Then we follow it. If there's a chance to outflank them or access resources.
No.
He looked at her.
You're making choices with half a deck. You're gambling on intel from the same enemies who just tried to murder us.
And you'd prefer we sit and wait for another ambush?
I'd prefer you stop leading with your pride, she said, her voice quiet but razor-edged. You've been right, mostly, but now you're desperate. And desperate leaders make mistakes.
I've kept us alive.
And I've kept you alive, she shot back.
Silence bloomed between them, thick with implications. Behind them, Talia stirred from the back wall, eyes flicking between the two. Jacob, still restrained and silent, smirked faintly, watching trust unravel.
If this is a trap, we disarm it. If it's an exit, we take it. But we don't ignore it.
Hardwick said nothing, but Langford felt it, the shift. She would follow for now, but doubt had set in. And once doubt took root in a protector like Emily Hardwick, it never left quietly. As they prepared to move again, Langford kept one hand near his sidearm, not for the enemy ahead, but for the allies who might soon question whether he still deserved their protection. Chapter 8, Fragile Allies. The group moved again, this time slower, deliberate. The map was now folded neatly in Langford's coat, but its presence felt radioactive. A single glance had shifted the course of their journey. The old strategy of escape had morphed into something murkier: navigation, exploration, infiltration. Still, every step forward echoed the risk. What if it was a lie? Hardwick walked ahead in near silence. Her doubt hadn't waned, but her professionalism kept her moving. At the rear, flanked by two watchful agents, Talia de Souza walked with her head down, until a sudden word floated through the tension like an arrow.
I can read it.
What did you say?
The map. It's not just a schematic. It's layered, with symbols, geometric ciphers. I studied them at Cambridge, part of a counterintelligence elective. No one took it seriously back then.
Hardwick narrowed her eyes.
You waited until now to mention this?
Talia raised her hands.
I didn't think it mattered until I saw the lower quadrant. There's an overlap pattern, look.
Langford unfurled the map and knelt beside her on a flat concrete surface. The others gathered tightly around as she began marking it with charcoal from a broken pipe nearby. She traced several hexagonal points in a spiral pattern. Then she overlaid a triangle inside them.
There,
she said, tapping the intersection point.
What is it?
It's a convergence symbol, used to denote entry points, often disguise escape hatches or covert elevators, and here... She
pointed to a small inverted delta symbol beside it.
This means it's active. That the access was recently used.
Hardwick leaned in.
That's beneath Sector B of the old CSIRO archives.
Langford met her gaze.
That's 3 kilometers northeast, past the cutoff where we lost signal.
Exactly.
Talia nodded.
And if the signal was jammed on purpose, it's because they didn't want us finding this route. It's not a trap. It's a hole in their control.
Hardwick slowly stood, arms crossed.
Or it's bait, left there to lure traitors back to extraction points.
Langford looked between them.
We have no reinforcements, no comms. If this is a lead, we take it.
Hardwick studied him again, but this time she gave the faintest nod.
We go quiet, lights off, radios dark.
Langford glanced at Talia, who offered a tentative smile. For the first time, he saw not a liability, but a mind. Not every ally is forged in loyalty. Some are forged in fire. They folded the map again and pressed forward, deeper into the unknown, toward a path long buried and possibly meant never to be found.
Chap, the unseen enemy.
They moved with the silence of survivors who no longer trusted the air around them. The path revealed by the decoded map sloped downward in narrow spirals, the walls slick with age and condensation. Every creak of boot leather, every shallow breath echoed like a signal flare in the dark. Langford led the middle of the group now, protected, but not idle. He carried the map in one hand, a flashlight in the other, keeping it off unless absolutely necessary. Beside him, Talia murmured coordinates when asked, her mind tethered to symbology and geometry more than emotion. Hardwick was the spear point. She checked corners before the group reached them, moving with an instinct honed by war zones and betrayals. But even she didn't see them at first. The enemy. They emerged not with flash and fire, but like smoke through cracks. Unseen, soundless, patient. The first clue came when a discarded ration pack, one Hardwick distinctly remembered leaving behind 2 corridors earlier, was suddenly gone when they passed it again. She froze.
What is it?
Langford noticed.
Eyes open, something's wrong.
Then a shift in the air, a vibration, subtle, low frequency, as though the tunnel was holding its breath. Behind them, Agent Morris, bringing up the rear, turned his head sharply.
I heard something. Back left, 4 o'clock.
Hardwick signaled for a halt. They killed all lights. Total blackness, nothing. But then a scrape. So soft it could have been imagined, except it wasn't. Langford felt the hair on his arms rise.
Hardwick drew her knife instead of her gun. The sound of a firearm was too loud down here. Too final. Too revealing. She pressed her comm quietly.
Infrared.
Talia passed a small scope forward, meant for night readiness. Hardwick activated it and scanned the corridor they had just traversed. Shapes, faint thermal signatures. 3. Stalking them at a distance of exactly 40 meters. Matching pace. Keeping their footsteps within the group's echoes. Mimicking silence.
Confirmed.
Langford clenched his jaw.
They're shadowing us.
Hardwick nodded.
And they're waiting for the right spot, where we can't run, can't maneuver. They want us boxed.
Then we turn the box into a trap.
Langford's brow furrowed.
We mark our pace wrong, misdirection, stage a corridor collapse using these.
She held up 2 detonators Hardwick had scavenged from earlier.
Lead them into a false advantage. Then seal the route behind them.
Langford looked at Hardwick. Her eyes glittered faintly.
She's right.
The Prime Minister gave a slow nod.
Then we make the shadows regret following us.
The hunters had made one mistake. They thought the prey had forgotten how to strike.
Chapter 10. The Denouement.
The corridor narrowed into a funnel, old structural supports lining the walls like the ribs of a long-dead beast. The group had entered what Hardwick called a natural kill box, a place where retreat was limited. Flanks were sealed, and visibility was poor. Perfect. Langford crouched beside an exposed maintenance panel, where Talia had rigged one of the 2 detonators with meticulous care. The other was 20 meters down the hall, nestled beneath a loose pile of broken stonework. "You are sure this will work?" he asked quietly.
I am as sure as a person decoding Cold War maps in the middle of a tactical horror show can be.
This is our moment. Stay sharp.
Wait, 3, 2, 1. Hardwick dropped him with 2 precise shots.
Another tried to run, scrambling up the collapsed mound.
Hold your fire.
The man froze at the sound of authority. He raised his hands, coughing violently. Blood streaked his face. "Do not shoot. I am not one of them anymore."
Talk fast.
The man's eyes darted. I was embedded, exfil unit. But they turned on us. They are not following orders anymore. They have gone rogue.
Who sent you? Who do they answer to?
Netzer, Israeli black operations. But these ones, they answer to no one now. They want something else.
Why are you still alive? We do not trust you,
She said flatly.
Disarm him, watch him, but we move. And more importantly,
He knew how to walk through them. And thus, the curtain falls on this arc of the shadows beneath.